not speaking. That way we can be sure to hear from everyone. And before I turn it over to the amazing presenters, I'm going to go ahead and just remind you that if you do need access to interpretation, it's super easy. All you need to do is look at the bottom of your screen. There'll be a globe that says interpretation. You can click on it and choose English or Spanish, and then just follow the directions and it will go ahead and lead you into the interpretation channel. And with that, I am going to pass it over to our amazing presenters.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you to our Spanish interpreters for allowing us to do language justice or flex our language justice muscles. We're gonna get started. I just wanna be sure that our interpreters are set up. I'm not able to see the chat at the moment. Let's see, okay, I think we're good. Okay. All right, good to go. So my name is Kamaria Laffrey. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a woman living with HIV since 2003, born with Black girl magic and chronic optimism. I am currently serving as the program director for the Sarah Project. And I'm gonna turn it over to my partner in change, Deirdre.
Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Deirdre Johnson Speaks. Most folks know me as Deirdre Speaks. My pronouns are she, hers, and amazingly queen, fabulously queen, and everything else in between. Yeah, everything else in between. I am living, learning, and loving life with and experiencing life with no apologies. I stand before you today as a co-presenter with the amazing Kamaria, and as well as the co-founder of Echo VA, as well as the state lead for Positive Women's Network in Virginia. And I am currently residing in Virginia. I will just give a quick disclaimer. It is storming here, so if my internet goes a little glitchy, do apologize in advance. It's just one of those things of beauties of living in the country. So welcome everyone, and we're so excited to be here. I'm gonna pass this back over to the partner in change, the queen in change.
So our session today is going to be recorded. These slides and the recording will be made available to you in the archive on the Whova platform, as all of our other sessions are once HINAC is over. The chat feature won't be a part of the recording, and you'll see why later. I won't be sharing the chat with folks later on, but if you want to share in the chat, feel free to do so. Also, feel free to use the chat box for any questions or comments. Your moderator, Kelly and Tammy Hott, will be fielding questions to us when we do open it up for question and answer time. I want to say I'm really, really glad that you all are here. Part one of this session is going to be very quick paced. It is not to make anyone feel silenced or that they can't keep up. It is intentional. We won't be having discussion for the very first portion, but part two, we will open up space for folks to have meaningful dialogue. This is planned out intentionally, and I hope that it all comes together and makes sense for everyone, and speaks to our collective purpose. Deirdre?
And just a couple of other just housekeeping. If you are just muted, just make sure, excuse me, if you're not speaking, just make sure that you are muted. But our purpose is honestly to discover and discuss what influences our personal core beliefs that help inform issues that we align and don't align with. As well as we're planning on putting on purpose and intention into agreeing and disagreeing with information we receive, to take a deeper dive into affirming individuals, even in movement spaces where we don't always agree with strategies, as well as methods in place, to address the difficulties that occur and understand the decisions made when demands aren't met, and as well as to know why you believe what you believe and own it. So we're excited to present to you today on these amazing purposes and what we will discover and discuss as we move forward.
Oh,
Oh.
go ahead.
So we are going to try to make this as interactive as possible. Today, we will be participating in Menti. I'm a Mentimeter. I'm sure several of us may have, but in the chat, we have included menti.com, and you will be asked to enter a code that we'll be sending to you very shortly. And don't worry, we got your back, and we will be practicing this process.
Oh. So when you get to the Menti screen, and we will have a practice session, you will see icons on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen within menti.com, and that's whether you'll be using your phone or your computer. You'll see a heart. If you see the heart, you can tap it as many times as you want. It's just affirming that you see what's on the page, that you agree with what's on the page, or you just feel like tapping the heart because you're addicted to Instagram and that's what you're used to doing. There's also going to be a thumbs up. There will be statements that will be read, and you'll be able to provide a thumbs up if you agree, or a thumbs down if you disagree. That's the portion that will be moving through really, really quickly. And then we'll come back to discuss what you agreed or disagreed to. Let's see. Sorry, so much is popping up. So I'm going to be switching over my screens in just a moment to walk us through a practice session. When we get, if everyone can on their device, pull up menti.com. And also, if you cannot access menti.com, let me add this. You can utilize the chat box to agree or disagree as well. So not forcing you all to have to utilize multiple platforms to be able to interact. But for those that want to, go to menti.com, and I'm going to pull up the code in just a moment. I need to switch sharing my screen. So you're about to see the madness of all the tabs that I have going on in my life.
Someone by the name of Tammy calls it tab hell. I think that's what we call it.
Purgatory, I think is what we call it over in tab purgatory. Or is that doodle purgatory? Whatever. All of the above.
And if, let me make sure, I see in the chat, I want to make sure that it is Menti, MENTI.
EI.
MENTI.
Okay.
No worries, I got you.
.com.
Thank you, Alicia. You beat me to it.
All right, and then I'm gonna share, I think I'm sharing my screen again. Give me just a second. So folks should see a slide with a code at the top. It's loading. So if someone can drop that code into the chat box, 7824-0485. For folks listening to this recording, that code will not be the same once you're listening to this. So I do apologize. It updates itself every 24 hours. Thanks. I see the affirmations of the hearts. So this is what the statements are going to look like. You'll see a statement. An example is chickens cross the street to get to the other side. Agree or disagree. Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't. And there's always one person that doesn't. And I love it. It makes me giggle every time. I love it. Oh,
And your heart feature, you can do as many hearts as you want to. Heart it up, heart it up, heart it up. You could do that. And you know, the thumbs up and thumbs down, it's going to be one time, pretty much, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, you can change your mind. So if someone who disagreed all of a sudden is like, oh wait, the slide slip, I read that wrong, I agree. Then you can switch over, it'll change the count. And I do recognize that everyone will not be participating, so the total number will not always equal the total number of people in the room with us today. So when I see it slow down, I'm going to switch back over to our other instructions. I'm going to be back and forth on screens, so bear with me, folks. I haven't fine-tuned this activity quite yet to not have to go back and forth. And I'm Cancerian, so we like to make things complicated just to keep others on their toes. Okay, so back to this, back to this. All right, so we've gone through our practice. And now we're gonna do some ground setting. I'm skipping slides, I apologize. So I do wanna take a moment and, we're at this conference, everyone's having a great time. We try to make these sessions and plenaries as interactive as possible. But for this space today, this session that we're in until 4:45 or maybe a little bit longer, before we begin this conversation, it's so important that we acknowledge that the subject matter discussed today may contain some sensitive subjects for some individuals, and that may include sexual assault, prosecution based on HIV status, and other forms of violence. These are difficult conversations, and we completely respect and honor every individual life experience and the right to both privacy and non-participation in any part of this discussion. Please do not feel forced to share or disclose something you don't want to, but do feel that this is a safe and brave space, that you are upheld and trust, have a space of trust by people who care and love you, care for and love you. Deirdre, if you want to go over the directions. You're on mute, love.
Yes, do we want to have the screen, what you call it, on the slide up, or we're good? All
Can't
right.
see the slide that says part 1 directions.
No, not on our screen right now. But if you need me to share my screen, I can.
I apologize.
No worries. This is a brave, safe space, and we lift everyone up.
Oh, I never hit share screen. How if I actually share?
Here we go.
Zoom won't let me be great today. Here you go, love.
But you are amazing anyways. No matter what, you're amazing. So part 1, we will have a series of statements that will be read with no context, excuse me. And each statement is up to you and up to your own interpretation and understanding. We will read each statement 2 times. We'll read each statement 2 times. Wait for interactive responses as explained in the preview slides. Then move forward very quickly to the next statement. There are a total of 7 statements. When we complete all 7, we will revisit those statements, but please for now provide your reaction to them all, just of agree or disagree. Oh, that was 2 agrees. Agree or disagree as we move forward. You can also heart as well.
And just to summarize and recap, Deirdre, you were glitching just a little bit. We're gonna read statements. You'll agree or disagree. And then we'll move on very quickly. If you wanna provide some context to why you agreed or disagreed in the chat, you can, but we're asking you to hold off until we get to part 2 of our session. Oh my gosh, why? It's just me not knowing what I'm clicking on. I'm good. I'm good. All right, so I'm gonna hit share screen again. That's the key, share screen.
I think we had a Kamaria freeze moment.
We did. I need to turn off my camera. That's what it is. Where am I? Stop video. All right, wait. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I turned off my camera. We got too much magic up in here and the computers can't handle it. So everyone can see the practice slides. So we're gonna start our activity now. And for anybody who couldn't hear because I might have been glitching, agree or disagree. What the next? There we go. Deirdre, you're gonna kick us off.
Yep. Number 1, a law that targets any person for living with HIV targets all people living with HIV. A law that targets any person for living with HIV targets all people living with HIV.
We're going to give it just a few seconds for people to weigh in, and then we'll move on. Remember that we're not having dialogue about the statements just yet, but we will give a chance for folks to chime in. If you cannot access Menti, you can provide your agree or disagree in the chat. All right. Number 2, sex workers would be less vulnerable to HIV-specific laws if they're required to take PrEP. Agree or disagree? Sex workers would be less vulnerable to HIV-specific laws if they're required to take PrEP. Agree or disagree? Also keep in mind, this is anonymous. I have no idea who's voting for what. All right, I think we're maintaining an average of 27 people participating with the votes, so I'll move forward.
Number 3, racial justice should be the center point of HIV criminalization dialogue. Agree or disagree? Racial justice should be the center point of HIV criminalization dialogue. Agree or disagree? We see y'all coming, yes, okay.
And I want everyone to take a deep breath before we go into the next one. Just breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. Number 4, in cases of rape or sexual assault, if HIV transmission occurs, sentencing should be enhanced. Agree or disagree? In cases of rape or sexual assault, if HIV transmission occurs, sentencing should be enhanced. I will also like to add, it's okay if you don't have a response. If a statement just doesn't make sense to you or doesn't resonate, that is also okay. All right, moving on.
Number 5, removing criminal penalties for people living with HIV who are virally suppressed is a successful approach. Agree or disagree? Removing criminal penalties for people living with HIV who are virally suppressed is a successful approach. Agree or disagree?
Okay. I think we have 2 more. Proof of malicious intent should be required in cases of HIV transmission. Agree or disagree? Proof of malicious intent should be required in cases of HIV transmission. Agree or disagree? Y'all are playing with my math skills. I keep trying to count and the votes keep changing. All right, I think I'm gonna move forward. to the last statement.
Number 7, people should never be criminalized for something about themselves they cannot change. Agree or disagree? People should never be criminalized for something about themselves they cannot change. Agree or disagree?
All right, I want to thank everyone for participating in these statements. I'm going to switch back over, bear with me, to the other slide set for us to begin part 2 of our time together. Okay. So we're going to take a collective and intentional breath at this moment. I'm being very serious, like we're going to pause and intentionally breathe. So take a deep breath and follow, if you have, well, you should be able to hear the sound on the screen. Just follow the prompt of,
Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out.
all right, thank you all for participating in intentional, wait, nope, we're not doing it again. Next slide. Why is it not going to the next slide? I got it. Okay, thank you all for participating in that. One thing I like to remind people before we dive into this conversation is sometimes folks will feel intimidated to share their insights of why they agreed or disagreed, or they'll start hearing someone else say something and then they want to change their minds, and then don't want to say anything. But I just want to encourage us to remember that we're all advocates. I want to quote my good dear sister in change, Stacey Jennings from South Carolina. She always says, when asked about advocacy and how long I've been an advocate, I inform others that I have been an advocate all my life. I was born an advocate. At birth, my way of communicating what I needed was by crying for milk to be fed. I have been advocating ever since. The first time I heard Stacey say that, I was like, son of a biscuit, I've been in this game forever, ever. So I just want us to remember that as we go into our discussion. So if Tammy or one of our moderators can drop down the statements into the chat box so folks can remember what was said, so that way I don't have to keep going back and sharing my screen. I'm going to ask, is it, yes? You don't have the statement? That would help if you want, or one at a time. All of them, please. I love this teamwork. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now because I would like for us to all see one another. And I'm gonna try to come off camera and hope my bandwidth holds out. Wait, I think I'm freezing again, so I'm just gonna leave it off. Stacey's here, oh my gosh. Okay, Stacey's in the house. All right, so the question up for discussion mostly is what statements resonated with you? What came up for you that you would like to go over? We can go through them one by one again. If folks want to share why they agreed with a statement, if folks want to share why they disagreed, or if folks would just like to break down some context. Some guidelines I'd like to give so that we don't miss people's comments is, as someone else is speaking, if you'd like to add to that, if you could just type stack in the chat box, that would help our moderators know who wants to speak next. And you can either, at that point when we call your name, you can come off mute and share. And I don't know if anything has been coming up in the chat box while we were, no. Just beautiful Stacy. Did anybody provide agree or disagree in the chat that weren't able to participate?
Yes. Yes, they did.
D, you can come off mute, love. You wanna come
Oh,
on?
hey, I remember you did this at HINAC. I loved it so much the last time. A statement that targets any person living with HIV, targets all people living with HIV, resonates with me because for me, we are all family. And if one person is being harmed, all of us are being harmed or criminalized. So we have to fight for one another. It's just like me looking at if it was me being criminalized, I would want my family or my group of advocates to fight for me. It affects all of us. So that's just how I see it.
Thank you. Are there any other stacks? I wanna, okay, Alicia, come off mute.
So I was gonna say number one as well, but Dee expressed it greatly. I would have to say for me was statement number 6, proof of malicious intent should be required in cases of HIV transmission. In the beginning, I was so for that, and being in this work for so long now and being healed from my own anger and unforgiveness, I don't even think I answered that. Because I wasn't just thinking about me answering it, I was thinking about other people and how they felt. So it was just a little difficult, and it did take me back. So, yeah.
Did you want to say something? All right, go ahead.
Sorry, I can't steal the bandwidth. So I was actually going to talk about number 4. I believe it was if there is rape, if somebody
Yes.
should be, their sentence should be enhanced if they transmit HIV. And for me, was a very difficult one. I'm an attorney and I used to be a prosecutor, and I dealt with a lot of rape cases. And while question one, if it's if there's a crime against one person with HIV, it's a crime against everybody. It was the one that I was triggered and couldn't come to a conclusion on, because while we never want to criminalize anything about the final question, what's the final one?
All people living with HIV shouldn't be, I don't have it memorized.
I believe that the last question also kind of circled back on that idea that I didn't want to criminalize anything that you can't change about yourself. That's the one that it was. It was like, should something be charged if they can't change it about themselves? But then it was the rape that, like, I think the rape is what's triggering me, not the HIV. So it was a hard question for me. Sorry.
Kamaria, can I piggyback on that?
Who's talking? Is that Tana?
Yeah.
And then I also see Tiami and as well as Susan Mo as well in the what you call it?
So Tana, since you want to piggyback off that statement, go ahead. But next we're going to have Susan, then Tiami, and then Raheem. And I apologize, I have candy in my mouth.
That is a hard one, but what I've learned this year is that, being in this session, thank God it's over. It's not over yet. But when we talk about rape victims, because I have to say from experience, I have been a rape victim. But when I look at it for HIV, I look at it on the little fish. I'm using it as a little fish, but if we go after the little fish, then we are gathering all the big fish, and we would make everyone suffer behind a rape, one person. So we would get more little fish especially when it comes to Black and brown communities, especially Black people. I'm gonna say Black people in general. So I had to look at it on that level, because if we go after one, we're going after all of the rest of the little fish.
Well said. Susan, Tiami, and then Raheem.
Hi, everyone, and I hope you can hear me. This is Susan.
Mhm.
Okay, yes, I wanted to continue with number 6. I really was really glad that was one of the things that we could talk about in the way that this was expressed. Proof of malicious intent should be required in cases of HIV transmission. No, no. And some of this, I mean, that's a big no for me. Some of this was talked about in sort of a way in the workshop we just had that was so amazing with the 3 presenters on bully and nothing about us without us. We forget that two people involved in consensual sex were involved in a fun activity, having fun with sex, enjoying sex. 2 people are engaged in that act, and then this whole thing comes up in number 6, trying to put a situation in a courtroom where legal people sometimes aren't even trying to stay up with us with the science and are still stuck back in the stigma. And so 6 was really powerful for me for a big no, like no. And I love what Dee, thank you. Number 1, I was going to say that, so that's great. I also don't have to do that. RJ for number 3, oh, big. I'm a big yes there. Yes, yes, yes. And I think that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Before Tiami comes up, I just want to clarify that some of these statements, there's no context given, right? So it's based on each case. Oh, Susan, can you go back on mute, please? Sorry.
Yeah, yes.
We have to keep in mind that the laws are written to keep people confused. We have to read between the lines. We always have to break things down so that we can understand how this is seriously impacting our individual lives. And I kind of crafted these statements the same way. Some of these statements come from personal experience, personal stories that I've heard of others, especially the malicious intent and the sexual assault one. And a lot of these statements have come out of Hynek, Alabama. Hynek number 2, I had completely different statements. And then the stories I heard afterwards made me step back and be like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about malicious intent. So I really appreciate the things that are being shared right now. Tiami, if you want to come off mute and share.
Thank you. I was looking at number 4, and I've agreed with everything that was said. There are already cases, and we've made this argument already. There are already cases on, not cases, but there are already laws on the docket right now about rape, sexual assault, all of that, right? And so it goes back to no one should be criminalized for a condition that they have that they can't change about themselves, right? So I agree with number 1. An attack on one is an attack on all, right? And so we say that we say these words or phrases in different contexts, like when we're talking about women's rights, reproductive rights. An attack on one is an attack on all, right? And so like looking at number 3, I do believe that racial justice should be the center point of HIV criminalization dialogue. The survivor stories from the conference that I've heard were all people of color. And so like, we all know this, like people of color, particularly Black people, are really impacted because of their intersectionality, and you add HIV onto it. In my case, being trans, I could be arrested for walking while trans, but I am living with HIV, right? And there is a law on the book pertaining to HIV here in Arkansas. But in those places where there aren't, there are sentence enhancements for sex work and then having an HIV diagnosis, right? And so an attack on one is an attack on all. I stand by it. I do know that removing penalties for people living with HIV who are virally suppressed was a successful approach, it's not the only approach, because then it puts us in an other category, right? And we have to remember that there are people who, because of the social determinants of life, will never reach an undetectable status, right? And so that constantly puts a target on their backs as well, but an attack on one is an attack on all. And that's just what I wanted to add to the conversation.
I just quickly wanted to, especially with the intent piece, with the work that we've done in Virginia, we have been very intentional in making sure, in talking about intent and transmission,
This is
and
pissing
putting
me
those.
off.
You okay, Tana?
Oh, I didn't know I was off mute. Oh, I'm fussing at my screen. Sorry.
I feel you, because these conversations will piss you off. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Ooh, girl, don't scare me. But yes, those intentional, having that and trying to define that intention, and discussing that, and trying to discover that. So just making sure that we are learning from each other, and like we said, attack on one is an attack on all, and we want to make sure to hold that up. I think our next one was D.
Yes, after Tiami was Raheem, then Michelle, then D. I just want to also remind people, trying to stay grounded, and this is a triggering space. When I first did this session, I was called a shit starter. I did not take that as a compliment when I left, because I never want to create harm for people. But then I learned, like, the whole point is to make people think. The goal of this session is to not change your mind. If that's what happens, cool. That's great. That means that you were open to receiving new information and changing what you thought you knew. My point, Deirdre's point of bringing us together to have this conversation, is to know what you know, but don't know why you know it. Own it. Because some of us say, oh, well, I saw on Facebook such and such, or I Googled this and such, but you don't know why you own that belief. So this conversation helps us own our beliefs, I feel. And I'm really enjoying the conversation that I'm seeing pieces of in the chat box, of folks talking about, how do you determine bad intentions? How does the law regulate what's going on in somebody's mind when they're engaging in, a sex act, enjoying their bodies, having pleasure, and then get accused of non-disclosure or any other horrible law that's in these damn states. Sorry. So I will stop rambling. Raheem, would you like to come off mute and share which statement? Thank you, Deirdre. Is Raheem still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. So the one that resonated the most with me was number 7. People should never be criminalized for something about themselves that they cannot change. And I just think that's the pillar of most of the work that I do now. Having people, being a queer Black man living with HIV, those are 3 demographics that have historically been over criminalized and over policed. So it's just, just seeing people that just are trying to exist and live their natural selves being criminalized, that's a certain passion. Like, hey, we have to do it's not right. Everyone should be able to live their lives comfortably and peacefully. So that was the one that related to me the most.
You were kind of fading out at the end, Raheem, so we couldn't catch everything you were saying, love.
Yeah, my internet connection's a little choppy.
I'm sorry. Did anyone else catch that wants to respond before we go over to Michelle? And I also want to say, like, I love, like, folks that are challenging others. Like, I'm confused on why you said that, and let's talk about it. And you're taking it to the chat, and you're not taking offense and taking it personal. Like, I love y'all for being adult enough and loving enough to be able to do that. And I hope you walk away from this space with a better understanding of where someone else is coming from, because this is also coming from our lived experiences, not just fact of what we read. Michelle, would you like to come off mute if you're still with us? And then we're gonna jump over to D, and I don't know who else is stacked after D. You wanna address it? Because I thought I already raised it. Michelle, are you with us still? If not, we're just gonna jump over to D. And Michelle, when you come up, just let us know in the chat. And then we're going to address Eddie Casto's question that's come up in the chat box. Go
Okay, so
ahead.
number 4, in the cases of rape and assault, if HIV transmission occurs, sentencing should be enhanced. So number 1 and 7 for me connect with number 4. We always say that we believe in HIV criminalization and that no one should be criminalized. I know that years ago, I was all for people being criminalized with HIV. And when I found out about the HIV criminalization laws, if it wasn't for Tammy, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I actually could have been one of those individuals who were criminalized because I ended up in sex work when I found out that I was living with HIV. So no one knows why someone does what they do when they live with HIV. There's so many thoughts mentally in your head, you give up. So as far as, I wouldn't say malicious intent, that one's kind of hard for me, just intent in general. How can you actually really prove intent? Was I intending on transmitting HIV to people that I was sleeping with when I was doing sex work? No, I wasn't thinking. I didn't care. I gave up. So all of these for me, it hits like right here. So no one should be criminalized for HIV. If we keep saying that someone needs to be criminalized for rape, yes, but not for the HIV, because again, we're criminalizing everyone. So I just thought I'd bring those little thoughts out.
They're not little thoughts, love. They're big thoughts. You have a big heart. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did Michelle come back on?
Did Michelle come back?
I was looking for Michelle. I saw, but I wasn't sure if they were able to unmute themselves. I think I'm seeing that correctly.
Well, our legal fellow wants to help us talk about. I thought you were going to answer this question.
No, I was going to ask Edward
Yes.
if he wanted to come off of mute
Yeah.
and start addressing his own question first, or ask his question to everybody.
Yes. You're muted, love.
Sorry, I was making a point about like if criminalization of HIV, then we should criminalize those people who are walking around and not taking care of themselves with COVID going around, because COVID, I guess now has surpassed the deaths of people with HIV. So knowing that, it's kind of one-sided, because HIV in a sense kind of attacks more of the Black community or the brown community versus the white. I mean, I know there's white folks out there that are living it, but in society, growing up with white folks, because I was adopted into that culture, I would say that there's more there's not much education in that culture, because when I actually am one of those who actually got criminalized for it. And so it scared everyone in that community. I was seen as a monster. So knowing that, I feel like people out there who's not, taking those precautions with COVID should almost be seen as the same way, but it's like almost a double standard. And that's kind of where I'm like, okay, well, how do you prove the intent? We have some people who just aren't necessarily caring about COVID and just doing whatever they want, and they could be affecting other people, and who knows what's going on in that realm. But that's, I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but that's kind of just how my thought process has been going on.
It absolutely did, and I, if I may, and if it's too much, please decline to answer. But being a Black man in a white community, and then being the monster, being labeled a monster, did the racism come out overtly, or were they still trying to be discreet about the race portion, or was it?
I honestly, sorry to interrupt, but I honestly don't even think it, like, I mean, yes, I think my race had a thing to do with it, but people aren't ignorant towards Black people. I think they're more ignorant towards HIV. And that was really the nail on the coffin that really solidified what happened to me. Yes, I was in a white culture, in the white community, but I was also still well liked in the white community outside of what happened. So it was mainly the HIV that really scared people more.
Mm. Thank you for sharing, Edward. I apologize for shortening your name without permission because I don't like when people do that to me. My bad.
No worries. I just recently switched it. I got older and I was like, Edward sounds good now.
It does sound good. I think we have a couple more in the stack, or one more.
Marcus, but he said he should be able to unmute.
Marcus, are you able to unmute and share which statement you wanted to talk about?
They were unable to, let me just make sure before I start speaking for Marcus. I was gonna read their statement.
You can, and I'm not sure who owner is, but they said prep question, and I guess they're referring to the statement about sex workers, which is while we're waiting for Marcus. Statement number 2, sex workers will be less vulnerable to HIV laws if they're required to take PrEP. So the person who is owner, are you able to unmute to say if you agreed or disagreed with that? Hi, Mary. Do you agree or disagree, or did you want to clarify? Did you want clarification on it?
You know, I wanted to see it again, but sex workers should be less vulnerable to HIV laws. If we're changing the laws, why are they being singled out?
Well, so the statements they're crafted based on the misinformation. These are intentionally controversial statements. This is not, we're not stating this as fact. Let me be clear for anyone who's joined late. These statements are not being listed as facts.
They are discussion, it's discussion, thought provoking. And again, I too want to commend each and every one of us for having these adult conversations and asking for clarification. These are things, you know, especially as coalition members, as you're moving in your work, there's going to be some hard topics that we're going to discuss, and to be able to speak with each other with respect and dignity, and understand, and not necessarily understand and agree with, but to at least be able to hear people's thoughts and opinions on those statements. So yes, Kamaria, I was going to read.
Marcus is unable to mute. He is able to unmute now.
Hey, able to unmute.
Oh, yay, there you go, Mo.
So I was basically saying that my statement that I wanted to discuss was number 3, racial justice should be the center point of HIV criminalization dialogue. Though I am really like a racial justice person, I sort of felt like, I don't think it should be the center point. I think it should be a prominent point, but I think the center point should be the science. It should be the U equals U. It should also be just educating, making sure our legislators are educated on HIV 101. Because I know a lot of our legislators, whenever I talk to our legislators, even some that I've talked to before, they still ask me, well, how does HIV work in the body? How does it do this? How does it do that? And a lot of our laws, I mentioned that I live in Mississippi, and Mississippi is one of the states that have HIV specific legislation. And our laws include feces and urine and saliva as modes of transmission for HIV, when we all know in this room and probably everywhere in the world that those are not effective modes of transmission. So if like, for example, I'm a person living with HIV, and if I were in a fight or arrested or something with a police officer, and I'm cut in the process, or if I'm go unconscious and some drool come out of the side of my mouth and touches that police officer, I would have an enhanced penalty for trying to transmit HIV to a peace officer. When we all know that there's no way, not with drool, like seriously, not with saliva, not with feces, not with urine. And that was really my main point. Like, we really need to make sure that we lead the talk with the science, and then come in as another center point, as not a center point, but as another prominent point in our argument, the racial justice piece.
I like that, how you laid that out, Marcus. You actually just shifted some of my thoughts, and I've been doing this this particular workshop for quite a while. But I do hear you, because sometimes when you're educating your legislators, you can't, depending on where you live, you definitely cannot walk into their office talking about racial justice. So I really
Yes, and as a member of the South,
I live in
completely-
Trump country and they still will not let the Confederate flag die. Even though we changed our flag, they still won't let it die. So yeah, no.
Oh, the work ahead of us, y'all, the work ahead of us. Thank you for sharing, Marcus. I did see Carrie and Lawrence and Stack, and unfortunately, those will be the last two statements we'll take as we draw to a close with our time together. Deirdre, if you want to put your our contact information, drop it in the chat. If people want to follow up with other questions, if you want this workshop done in your community, hit us up and we'll happy to come out. Carrie, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, so the racial justice one, I always struggle with as well. And it's like, you know, there's priorities, and I actually think it's the center of a lot of what we do, but if I lead with racial justice in the state of Indiana, we won't make any progress at all. And the science is important, but I also say, well, don't forget about the criminal justice piece and how these laws fundamentally violate, regardless of science, just best practices in criminal justice. And I think that's why I'm struggling with that in number 6, because we've always been taught you have to prove intent to harm, and that's the problem with these laws. So I'm so confused. I'm going to leave this workshop so confused by our chat and the dialogue. But I struggle with the racial justice piece, especially as a white person leading the movement here on, you know, why aren't you leading with that racial justice piece? And I know my answer is because we're in a super conservative state where people don't care about Black people. And so if you lead with that, especially with our legislators, we just won't make progress. Even if I put people who are Black living with HIV testifying, you just won't make progress in our state. And it's unfortunate, but it's almost like a political game that you're trying to do. Because then the question I have is, are we actually dismantling racism by not bringing it to the forefront, not, you know, making ourselves uncomfortable and that sort of thing. So I struggle with that one a lot in terms of just how to embrace this and how to do justice to racial justice in our state.
I think that speaks a lot to allyship and trying to understand at what point is it okay. Me as a Black woman, sometimes I struggle with bringing up racial justice because I'm like, are these people going to hear me? Even in my own community, my own family, my own friends. Justice because it can go. I forgot who was next, and I think I froze. So I'm gonna turn off my camera.
I saw that it was Lawrence. I know Lawrence said that the comments were made, but Lawrence, if there's any other piece that you would like to add.
I'll pass at this time and yield the floor. I'm in a good listening mode today, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all, like literally for these conversations, these discussions on these topics. Again, you know, they're not facts, but they are just discussion points. Definitely high five to each and every one of us that showed up, not just in our session, but in all of the sessions that have been happening at HYNAC this year. That means you are interested in finding out more, you want to learn more and learn more about how to implement things in your community, as well as to share and start these conversations in your circles. Always know you got 2 professional shit starters over here. We are more than welcome. I'm always ready Freddy over this camp to definitely come in and just to have these frank discussions. I know myself have actually had these conversations with my family and friends, have been thought-provoking and very enlightening in so many ways, but beautiful just to be able to talk, you know?
Yeah, this was first, thank you again to our language justice Spanish interpreters. Greatly appreciate you. Hope that you could keep up with all of the conversation. Deirdre, thank you, Queen, for helping me co-facilitate. Like, you're amazing. And then a big thank you to our moderators in the chat that were keeping up with the statements and keeping up with who wanted to speak. And then an extra special loving thank you to all of you all for being a part of this sometimes difficult conversation that we struggle with. And we don't always get a chance to just hold space and be still and kind of sit in this stuff. So HYNAC is that place. Again, if you ever want this workshop replicated in your community, it can be done virtual. It's real fun in person, y'all. Might have to go out for drinks afterwards,
Yes.
but it's definitely fun in person. So just our information's been shared in the chat. You can find our contact on Hoover. You can Google us. I'm gonna be black and proud. You can Google me because I'm that important. No, I'm just kidding. No, but you can Google Deirdre Speaks. You can Google that queen. You can Google me and contact us on all the platforms. Thank you again. I think we have like 2 minutes. So or 3 minutes, 2 minutes. I don't like ending early, but
2 minutes, and thank you, Queen, for allowing me to present with you. This has been amazing. It's been amazing. Thank you all. Let me make sure I put our information again in the chat.
Information, and there has been a link shared for survey feedback for your HYNAC participation. I miss being in personal space with y'all. Well, not personal space. I miss being in shared space with you all so much. But this training academy has given the opportunity for us to regenerate or replicate what we are missing in person. So with that being said, special thanks to everyone again. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the remaining sessions. Join us tonight for open mic night, y'all. Y'all are really going to be surprised at who's performing and coming out to do the damn thing. Like I'm not one of those people, so so you're not disappointed. I'm not one of them.
I'm not either. Just kidding.
I'm excited about it.
Be excited. Come out, celebrate your community. Carl Sanchez and Olga Irwin will be hosting. We'll have a DJ. We're going to dance. We're going to have a good time. Talk to you all later. Hopefully see you sooner. Love you all. Good.
Love you.
Love you, mean it. Love you, mean it.